Luca never meant to listen so closely. He only glanced toward Elena because her voice, normally steady, careful, impossible to read, suddenly trembled as she answered her phone. Italian words spilled out of her in a tone that didn't belong to the woman who always kept herself composed. It sounded like fear trying to hold itself upright. It sounded like recognition she didn't want. And the moment she ended the call, she shut down so abruptly it felt like watching a door slam in his face. Elena didn't look at him. She didn't speak. She folded into herself so tightly it hurt to witness. Luca felt something ugly twist in his chest. He hated mysteries. He hated being shut out. But what he hated most was the thought that she was terrified of something or someone and hadn't told him. "Elena," Luca said quietly. She stiffened. Her voice was barely there. "It's nothing, Luca. Please, just drop it." The softness in her lie only sharpened his focus. Luca studied her, the way her fingers curled toward her palms, the way her breathing didn't fully settle, the way she kept her eyes away from his like she feared what he might read in them. She had never looked so breakable, and she had never tried so hard to hide it. He stepped closer without meaning to. She stepped back as if anything near him might burn her. The space between them tightened, pulling them into a silent clash neither wanted to acknowledge. It wasn't hostility. It was something deeper, more complicated, something that made Luca's pulse uncomfortably uneven. "You expect me to ignore that?" he asked, not raising his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was enough. Elena swallowed. "It has nothing to do with you." That was the first cut, a clean, precise one, because she was wrong. It did have something to do with him. The moment her fear reached him, it became his concern, his distraction, his problem in ways he couldn't explain. Luca felt frustration coil inside him, but beneath it was something else, an instinctive pull to understand her, to protect her, to tear open the walls she hid behind. He shouldn't care, but he did. The day forced them together more than usual, responsibilities tying their paths in ways neither could avoid. Each time their eyes met, Elena looked away too fast. Each time she spoke, her voice was quieter than it had been the day before. The emotional resistance between them grew sharp, impossible to ignore. Luca's patience thinned with every unanswered question, every half-truth she tried to bury him under. Hours slowly dragged them into the same space, the same conversations, the same air heavy with words they didn't say. And as the time wore on, her mask, usually perfect, began to slip. Luca caught her leaning against a chair, breathing too slowly as if trying to keep from shaking. She didn't see him watching. She didn't realize how many times her fingers pressed against her wrist as if grounding herself. She didn't realize she whispered something in Italian under her breath, something that sounded like, "Not again." "Elena," he said softly, the gentlest he had spoken her name. Her eyes flicked up, guarded instantly, like she regretted letting him witness even a second of vulnerability. "Luca, I said I'm fine." "You're not," he said, "and you're terrible at pretending you are." Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to confess, but she stayed silent. Something like fear flickered through her eyes before she smothered it again. Luca felt something painful rise inside him. He didn't know when he'd started caring. He just knew he couldn't stop. A moment passed, tight, quiet, fragile, and then one of his men interrupted, murmuring a name that froze both him and Elena at the same time. Luca's expression changed first. Recognition, calculation, a sudden cold realization. Elena didn't breathe. That name, the one he'd just heard, never should have connected to her. And yet the instant it left his guard's mouth, she looked like a person whose past had finally found her. Luca turned to her slowly. "That's who called you." She didn't deny it. Her silence was answer enough. Her fear, raw and unguarded now, was confirmation. "Elena," he murmured, "why did you hide this from me?" Her voice cracked on the first word. "Because you weren't supposed to know, because I wanted to keep you out of it." "Out of what?" Luca demanded, but even he heard the wounded edge in his own voice. "Out of your life?" She flinched. "Out of my past." Her eyes finally met his. For the first time, he saw the truth. Exhaustion, guilt, something like shame. And beneath it, something else he didn't expect. Worry for him. Luca didn't know how to process that. "Whoever he is," Luca said quietly, "he's tied to my enemies." She nodded once, barely. "I didn't know, not until today." Silence, a painful one. "I didn't want to drag you into this," she whispered. "You already have enough threats. I didn't want to be another one." Luca almost laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You think you're a threat to me?" "No," she whispered. "I'm a liability." Luca stepped toward her. Elena stepped back again. That single movement felt like a blow. "Elena," he said, voice tight, "look at me." She did, and he saw everything, her fear, her sadness, the instinct telling her to run. He didn't understand why it hurt. Then she made the decision he felt breaking in real time. "I should go," she said softly, "before this gets worse, before he uses me to get to you." "No," Luca said immediately, but she had already turned away, already retreating, already protecting him in the most devastating way, by leaving. Luca felt something inside him crack open. He didn't think. He couldn't. Watching her walk away felt like losing something he didn't even allow himself to want. His guard looked at him, waiting for instruction. The words formed before he could stop them. "Don't let her go," Luca ordered. His voice wasn't cold. It wasn't commanding. It was raw, unarmored, and it terrified him how true it felt. Elena froze when she heard his men move behind her. She didn't turn around. Luca didn't move toward her either. The space between them pulsed with everything they hadn't said. He didn't know what would happen next. If she would stay, if she would fight him, if she would finally tell him the truth trapped under her ribs. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He couldn't watch her walk out of his world. Not now. Not after today. Not after hearing the fear in her voice. Not after seeing the way it hollowed him out. Elena slowly turned back toward him, eyes wide, confused, aching. "Luca," she whispered. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Because the truth was already hanging in the air, the truth he never meant for her to see. He wasn't afraid of her past. He was afraid of losing her. Luca didn't expect the sound of Elena's voice to alter the rhythm of his breathing. It happened too suddenly. Her phone buzzing, her quiet, "Scusi," and then the sharp, trembling Italian pouring out of her like something pulled straight from an old wound she never meant for anyone to hear. She wasn't calm. She wasn't distant. She wasn't the unreachable woman he'd convinced himself she was. Elena sounded desperate, and that single crack in her control hit him harder than anything in years. He didn't understand why his chest tightened as he listened. He didn't understand why every word she whispered felt like it held a truth she'd never trust him with. But he watched her crumble, watched panic flicker through her eyes, watched her rebuild herself in the space of one breath, like she'd been doing it her whole life. And the second she noticed him, she shut down completely, sealing every trace of fear behind a polite, practiced silence. "Elena," Luca said, trying to keep his voice even. She didn't meet his eyes. "Luca, it's personal." Personal. He felt the word slice through something fragile inside him. She might as well have said, "You're not allowed in my world." And maybe he wasn't. But he hated the way she flinched when he stepped closer, as if proximity itself was dangerous. Luca's instinct screamed to push, but he forced himself to breathe instead. Something about her expression, tight, haunted, made him hold still. yet the distance between them felt unbearable. Their day left them no room to avoid each other. Tasks, meetings, obligations, all of it pushed them into the same orbit, and Luca felt every inch of her resistance like a bruise forming under his ribs. She wouldn't look at him longer than a heartbeat. She wouldn't speak unless necessary. But every time she did, her voice carried a strain she couldn't hide. He didn't know whether it angered him or unsettled him more. At one point, Elena brushed past him, murmuring a distracted, "sorry," and Luca felt heat flash through his chest. Not anger. Something more dangerous. Something he refused to name. "Elena," he said quietly, "what's happening to you?" She shook her head. "Don't ask me that." The plea in her voice wasn't weak. It was terrified, and Luca's breath caught at the realization. Her silence wasn't stubbornness. It was survival. He stared at her, seeing her differently now, seeing the way she held herself like someone bracing for impact, as if one wrong question might shatter her. He wanted to demand answers, but what came out was softer. "I can't ignore that call." Her hands tightened at her sides. "Please let me handle it." "You're not handling it," Luca murmured. "You're sinking." Her eyes flickered up in a rare spark of emotion. Hurt, anger, fear tangled together. Then she turned away, retreating into herself. And that's when the real shift began. Forced proximity kept dragging them into moments neither could escape. Brief glances that lingered too long, breath catching in their throats at the wrong times. Elena avoiding Luca, and Luca following instincts he didn't trust. He saw her drop something that shouldn't have shaken her, yet her hands trembled when she picked it up. He saw her step into an empty corridor and whisper a prayer in Italian. Too soft for him to hear, but loud enough to tell him she was afraid. He saw her slip once, just once, and reveal a truth in the way she clutched her arm like she needed to hold herself together, and it broke something in him. "Elena," he said again, later, voice lower, gentler, "just tell me if you're in danger." She looked at him with eyes that begged for distance. "It doesn't matter. Not between us." But Luca could no longer pretend she was just his assistant. He could no longer pretend her fear didn't undo him in ways he didn't understand. As the hours passed, small pieces of her past slipped through the cracks. A man she once knew, someone who didn't accept being left behind, a voice that tasted like old control and old wounds, a threat resurfacing exactly when she least expected it. "Elena," Luca said slowly, putting the pieces together, "who called you?" She closed her eyes. "Someone who should remain in my past." "And yet he's not," Luca replied. "Not if you're shaking like this." "It's not your responsibility," Elena whispered. "No," Luca said, surprising even himself. "It's not, but you are." Her breath stilled. She stared at him as if the words wounded her more than the threat itself. But she didn't argue. For the first time, she didn't push back. And that moment, small, fragile, shifted everything. It softened something that had been locked between them, something neither dared acknowledge. But the softening didn't last. The twist hit without warning. One of Luca's men murmured a name to him, quietly, cautiously, a name tied to betrayal, a name Luca had buried in anger years ago, the same name Elena had been running from. Luca's expression froze. Elena's face drained of color, and suddenly everything twisted into a knot of disbelief and dread. "Elena," Luca whispered, "how do you know him?" She shook her head desperately. "I didn't know he was connected to you. I didn't know any of that. I swear I didn't." Luca's mind raced. Betrayal, danger, history colliding with the present in a way that felt cruelly intentional. Elena looked like she couldn't breathe. If he finds out I'm here, if he knows about us. "There is no us," Luca said too fast. The words stabbed both of them. He didn't mean them. She knew he didn't. But they were out, sharp and final, and they pushed her backward like a physical shove. "I should leave," Elena whispered, voice breaking. "It's safer for you, for everyone." "No," Lucas said immediately, but she was already stepping back. "I won't let my past hurt you. I won't let him drag you into this. I can't be the reason—" "Elena," Luca warned, "don't do this." But she did. She turned to go, choosing safety over letting him see how deeply this terrified her. And that's when the realization hit him. Not gradual, not thoughtful, violent, immediate, as if every feeling he'd been ignoring slammed into him at once. He didn't want safety. He didn't want distance. He didn't want her slipping out of his reach because of a past she never chose. His voice came out before he could restrain it. "Don't let her go." The order was low, rough, exposing every truth he hadn't spoken. Elena froze, breath caught, shoulders shaking. She didn't turn. Luca didn't move. The air between them felt like a confession neither had the courage to voice. Because in that single order, she heard what he finally understood. He wasn't trying to protect himself from her world. He was terrified of losing her from his. And Luca, controlled, calculated, untouchable Luca, could no longer pretend he didn't care. Elena felt the world narrow to a single trembling breath the moment her phone vibrated against her palm. She should have ignored it. She should have stayed silent. But the moment she heard that voice, old fear broke through every barrier she had spent years building, and the words escaped her in rapid Italian she no longer had control over. Her tone wasn't steady. It wasn't professional. It wasn't the version of herself she allowed anyone to hear. It was raw, frightened, painfully exposed, and Luca heard every syllable. When Elena turned and saw Luca watching her, her stomach dropped as though she had been caught revealing something she had no right to carry. His expression wasn't harsh, but something in his eyes felt too intrusive, too perceptive, too dangerous. She cut her gaze away instantly, throat tightening as she forced out a stiff, "It was nothing." She knew he wouldn't believe her. Luca didn't answer at first, and that silence pressed against her ribs until she couldn't breathe correctly. Elena felt him still looking at her, and her pulse stumbled, desperate to retreat into invisibility again. Invisibility had saved her before, but Luca had never struggled to read people, until her. And now he looked at her like she had suddenly become impossible to ignore. "Elena," Luca said quietly, the firmness in his voice unable to mask the concern beneath. "Who was that?" "No one," she whispered, and the lie tasted like broken glass. Luca heard the crack in her voice. He didn't push, not yet, but something in his chest tightened, a painful shift he didn't understand. He had never been affected by weakness before, yet hers, small, unintentional, hidden, felt like a thread tugging at something inside him he hadn't realized was loose. Hours passed with the two of them trapped in the same tasks, the same conversations, the same unavoidable closeness that made every breath feel heavier. Elena tried to pretend nothing had changed, but the tremble in her hands betrayed her. Her voice held a strain she couldn't disguise, and every fleeting moment of eye contact left her exposed in ways she couldn't tolerate. Luca noticed everything she tried to hide. Every time Elena pulled away from a simple question, it hit him deeper than it should. Every time she flinched at her phone buzz, his jaw tightened. Every time she forced her hands still, he felt a strange ache of protectiveness he'd never allowed himself to feel. Her silence struck him harder than truth ever could. At one point, her fingers slipped on a document, barely a mistake at all, but the way her breath shook as she corrected it made Luca freeze. Something in him softened, then hardened, then tangled into confusion he wasn't prepared for. "Elena," Luca said again, lowering his voice, "you're not all right." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth hovered between them, heavy and fragile. His chest tightened with a sudden pulse of anger, not at her, but at whatever had cracked her calm so violently. He wanted to demand answers, but Elena's shoulders drew in the moment he stepped closer, and he stopped. She wasn't scared of him. She was scared of being seen. Their silence stretched, thick with tension neither could escape. Later, Elena stood alone for a moment, pressing a hand to her forehead as though trying to hold herself together. A whisper escaped her, soft, pained, unguarded. Luca wasn't meant to hear it, but he did, and something in him shifted sharply. The sound of her fear lodged itself beneath his ribs, and he didn't know how to dislodge it. "Tell me what's happening," Luca said softly when she noticed him again. Elena shook her head. "I do not want you involved. It's not your place." The words cut deeply, sharper than she intended. Luca's chest tightened, not from offense, but from the realization that she was terrified enough to push him away, even when she was falling apart. Her phone buzzed again. Elena froze. Luca saw the panic flash through her eyes. She snatched the phone before he could glimpse the screen, but her reaction alone was enough to confirm his suspicion. Danger. Not imagined. Not exaggerated. Real. "Elena," he said again, this time with a steady firmness, "you're hiding something that's hurting you." She inhaled shakily. "I can't let it touch this place. I can't let it reach you." The sincerity in her voice shook him more than any secret could have. He didn't understand why the idea of her facing something alone made his stomach twist. He didn't understand why watching her slowly crumble felt unbearable. But everything changed when one of Luca's men approached quietly and murmured a name to him, a name Luca had buried long ago, associated with a level of betrayal he didn't talk about, a name from a past he had closed off, the same name that had been calling Elena. Luca's expression darkened. Elena saw it instantly, and her face drained of color. He turned toward her slowly. "How do you know him?" Elena's breath hitched. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "That's not an answer." She swallowed, her voice breaking. "He was someone who tried to control my life. I escaped. I thought he was gone." "And now he's in my world," Luca murmured, trying to piece together the impossible connection while his pulse hammered with disbelief. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear to you, Luca, I didn't know he was connected to you. If I had, I never would have come here. I never would have let you—" She stopped herself, but the unfinished sentence burned. Luca fought to breathe evenly. Betrayal, fear, familiar anger, and beneath all of it, hurt he had no right to feel. Elena stepped back, panic flickering wildly in her eyes. "I need to leave, before this gets worse, before he realizes I'm near you." "No," Luca said instantly. "It's safer," Elena whispered. "For you, for everyone. He destroys everything he touches. I won't let him reach you through me." Her voice cracked, and Luca froze. She wasn't leaving for herself. She was leaving for him, and that realization hit him like a blow. "Elena," Luca said, voice low, "don't walk away." She looked at him with a kind of resignation that felt like goodbye, and it tore something open inside him. "I can't stay," she whispered. "Not when I'm the reason danger is coming toward you." Something in Luca snapped at the thought of her disappearing, quietly, obediently, painfully, like she had been conditioned to fade out of people's lives long before they noticed she was gone. She took a step backward, then another. And that was the moment Luca felt everything he had refused to acknowledge surge up violently. Fear, protectiveness, something dangerously close to longing. Before he could think, before he could shield himself, the words escaped him with raw urgency. "Don't let her go." The room stilled. Elena froze mid-step, breath trembling. It wasn't an order rooted in suspicion. It wasn't about secrets or danger. It was about her. Luca had finally realized the truth he'd been fighting since the moment he heard her voice break. She mattered. More than she should. More than he understood. More than he was ready to admit. And letting her walk away felt like losing something he had only just discovered he needed. Luca hears the click of the call ending before Elena even lowers the phone, but the damage has already slipped into the air between them. She tries to hide it. She always tries. But her voice had cracked, and that sound still pulses through him like something sharp. He can feel her withdrawing even while standing in the same room, her posture folding inwards the way someone does when bracing for impact. She looks at anything except him, and that alone tells him the call wasn't just unpleasant. It was a reopening. "Elena," Luca says quietly, because softness has a way of prying truth open, and he knows she knows that. "Who was it?" She shakes her head too quickly. "It's nothing. Just wrong number." It's the lie that hurts more than the tension. Luca isn't used to fear. He isn't used to being shut out either, especially not by her. Something in him tightens, but he forces his voice steady. "Your Italian slipped," he says. "People don't panic in a wrong number." Elena's throat moves, but she keeps her gaze down. "Drop it." "I can't," Luca answers, and his honesty sounds rawer than he intends. "Not when you look like that." She flinches. Not from him, Luca can tell the difference, but from something inside her, something that call stirred up. She walks past him, creating space, but the space vibrates. It's the kind that pulls instead of releases. She intends distance, but it only leaves him more aware of her. They're forced to spend the evening together. Neither can leave, not with the guests arriving soon. The timing is cruel. Her emotional walls are slamming into place, and he's stuck on the other side, feeling the echo. Luca watches her from the corner of his eye as they move through the living room. She isn't fidgeting, but her breaths are uneven, controlled too deliberately. He shouldn't notice such things. He shouldn't care about the way her voice has gone faint around the edges. But caring hit him long before he realized it, and now he can't unfeel it. "Elena." He tries again. She doesn't look at him. "Please don't. Not tonight." The plea is softer, almost fragile, a crack she didn't intend to show. It makes his chest tighten because she never asks for anything, and she certainly never pleads. "You're trembling," Luca says. "You think I don't see it?" Her hands freeze. That's when she finally meets his eyes, quick, defensive, ashamed. "I'm fine." "No, you're terrified." "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." The air shifts. Her inhale stutters, barely noticeable, but for Luca it's loud, too loud. She turns away again. "I don't want you involved." It's already too late for that. Her fingers curl. "Luca, some things shouldn't follow a person. Some things should stay buried." "And yet they keep calling you," he replies. Her breath breaks there. Very small, but he hears it. She presses her palm to her forehead like she can wipe away the moment, the fear, the history she refuses to speak about. He wants to reach for her, but touch would shatter her right now. "Elena," he murmurs, "whoever it was." "It doesn't matter who," she snaps, but the sound isn't anger. It's despair. The kind of despair that's grown familiar in her bones. The silence afterward stretches tight until she whispers, "I wish I could erase my past. I wish it wasn't something I had to keep outrunning." The confession hits him differently. Vulnerability isn't something she gives easily, and this one falls out like she didn't mean to let it loose. He steps closer, not enough to corner her, just enough so she can feel he's there. "You don't have to outrun anything alone," Luca says. But she shakes her head. "You don't understand. If you knew—" She stops, biting the words back, and for a moment Luca sees something break in her. Something she refuses to name. He almost lets it go. Almost. But then her phone buzzes again on the counter, screen lighting up. Just a name. A name Luca recognizes with a cold jolt. Not a stranger, not a random threat. A man tied to Luca's own enemies. A man Elena once worked under before she vanished from that life entirely. Something sharp and violent pierces his chest. Not jealousy, not even anger yet. It's realization. It's the understanding that she didn't just run from danger. She ran from him, the caller, the one person who had been the shadow in her voice since the day Luca met her. "Elena," he says slowly, "you know him." She goes pale. "Luca? He's the reason you left your old life." Her silence confirms everything. Luca feels something snap inside him, a protective instinct he didn't ask for, a need to keep her safe that feels too personal, too consuming. And beneath that, hurt. Not that she had a past, but that she thought she needed to hide it from him, that she thought he would turn cold. She sees the shift in his expression, misreads it instantly, and her eyes soften in resignation. "It's okay," she whispers. "You don't have to say anything. I get it now." "Elena, don't—" "You'll see me as a liability," she continues, voice barely steady. "I should have known this would happen. I shouldn't have stayed here this long." She moves quickly, too quickly for someone so shaken. She crosses the room, grabs her bag, stuffing what little she brought with her. Luca's breath lodges in his throat. Something fierce surges in him, but no words come fast enough. "Elena," he says, stepping toward her. But she refuses to look back. "I'll leave before I make things worse for you." He feels it then. The realization slamming into him with more force than he can hide. She's the first person he's wanted something real with. The first person who made him see himself differently, even in the smallest ways. And she's walking away because she thinks she's protecting him. "Elena." His voice roughens. "Stop!" She wipes her eyes with her sleeve, still not turning. "It's better this way." "No, it isn't." "It is." Her voice breaks. "I don't want you paying the price for my past." The final crack inside him splits open. Everything he's tried to ignore, all the wanting, the protectiveness, the need to pull her back where she belongs, rushes to the surface at once. Luca steps forward, grabs the edge of the doorway before she can walk through it, blocking her path with nothing but breath and desperation. "Elena," he says, low and unguarded, "don't go." She freezes. His voice drops further, raw and trembling with everything he's held back. "Don't let her go." It isn't an order to someone else. It's a plea to himself, a command to the world, a confession he can't take back. Elena turns slowly, eyes wide with shock, pain, longing, everything she tried so hard to bury. "Luca," she whispers. He steps closer, not touching her, just close enough for her to feel the truth in his voice. "I don't care who called. I don't care what your past is. I care that you're here, with me. Don't walk away from that." Her bag slips from her fingers. The soft sound of it hitting the floor feels like a heartbeat restarting. And for the first time since the call, Elena breathes without shaking. Top of form, bottom of form. Elena answered the phone as if she wished her own voice could disappear. Luca heard the shift the instant she spoke. Her Italian was usually gentle, almost musical, but now it cut through the air in sharp, trembling pieces. He didn't understand the full sentences, but he understood fear. He understood the way silence thickened around her when she was fighting to breathe through panic. And he understood the instinct that rose in him, uninvited and unwelcome, demanding to know who could make her sound like that. When she ended the call, Elena didn't move. It was as if she was trying to shrink inside herself, as if stillness might hide her. Her eyes didn't meet Luca's, not even when he stepped closer, not even when he whispered her name with a restraint that cost him more than she knew. "Who was that?" Luca asked. "No one important." The lie came too quickly. It landed between them with the weight of something breaking. Elena seemed to feel it too, because her breath caught, and she pressed her palm to her forehead in a gesture she tried to disguise as fatigue. Luca watched her carefully, the way she tried to pull away from the moment, from him, from the truth she feared he might uncover. He reached out, not to touch her, but to stop her retreat. "Elena, I said it's nothing." Her voice wavered, betraying her again, and she shut her eyes like she wished she could take the words back. A crisis forced them to spend the next hours together. Timing, circumstances, fate, whatever name she wanted to give it. Elena sat near him, but her entire being leaned away. Luca felt the distance like a physical ache. He'd never cared about someone keeping their life separate from his, yet with her it scraped something deep in him, something he didn't want to examine. The longer they sat in that tension, the more he began noticing things he had ignored before. The slight tremble in her exhale whenever her thoughts drifted, the way she tensed before answering even simple questions, the subtle flinch whenever his voice softened instead of hardened. She hid everything, but her body revealed the truth. Whatever had happened on that call had touched a wound she'd never let him see. Elena hated that he noticed. She hated how every minute with Luca made her feel exposed, as if he could read the fractures she spent years keeping sealed. Her silence wasn't coldness, it was survival. Distance had been her only shield since the day she crossed paths with him. She believed it was dangerous to let someone like Luca see where she bled. But tonight, her voice had betrayed her, and Luca wasn't letting it go. At one point she murmured, almost to herself, "I wish I could erase my past." The words slipped out before she could catch them. She stiffened immediately, regretting them, but Luca heard something raw in her tone that pulled him closer. "Elena," he said quietly, "who are you running from?" She shook her head. "I'm not running." He didn't believe her. He didn't say it, but she felt it in the silence. Hours passed. The crisis they were waiting on stretched longer than expected. The emotional distance between them grew narrower with every passing breath until it felt like there was no room left to lie. Luca stepped away briefly, answering a call of his own. Elena tried not to listen, but she heard the sudden change in his tone. It wasn't anger, it was realization. Something cold, sharp, and devastating sank into her stomach. When Luca returned, his expression had changed. No rage, no accusation, something far worse. He looked at her like he had finally connected pieces she never wanted him to find. "Elena," he said softly, "the man who called you, his name. Is it—" She flinched before he even finished the question. That was enough. Luca's jaw tightened. Everything inside him twisted. The name belonged to someone who had once tried to claim her, someone who didn't understand restraint, someone who now had business in Luca's territory, and Elena had known before he did. That knowledge hit Luca like betrayal, though he knew she hadn't meant it as one. But the thought of someone else's shadow still reaching for her, still frightening her, still haunting her. Something inside him hardened and broke all at once. Elena saw the shift, and she misunderstood it completely. She thought he saw her as a problem now, a complication he didn't need. She thought he had finally realized she brought danger with her, and she couldn't blame him if he wanted distance. People like Luca didn't tolerate liabilities. They cut them out. So she chose to leave before he had to say the words. When Luca returned to the room and found her packing her things in quiet, trembling movements, something inside him snapped. "Elena, what are you doing?" "I should go," she whispered. "It's safer for you if I'm not here." He stared at her, unprepared for the surge of emotion that rose like a storm inside him. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't even asking for understanding. She was stepping out of his life as if she had never been part of it, as if she believed he felt nothing. "Elena," Luca said, his voice rough, "stop." She didn't. She kept folding a small piece of her life into a bag, refusing to look at him because she already knew it would hurt. Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. She had learned long ago not to break where someone could see her, but Luca saw her breaking anyway. And the realization hit him with a force he didn't expect. She mattered. More than power, more than control, more than every rule he lived by. She was the first person who made him want something he couldn't command or strategize or take. She was the first person who made him want. "Elena," he said again, but this time the word came out like a wound, raw and unguarded. She froze. Luca didn't give himself time to think. He stepped toward the doorway and spoke the order with a voice that fractured at the edges, a voice that didn't sound like his own. "Don't let her go." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't dominance. It was desperation, quiet, honest, and stripped of the armor he always wore. Elena turned slowly, her breath unsteady, her eyes wide with something that looked painfully close to hope. And in the stillness between them, everything shifted. Elena answers the call the way someone touches a wound they pretend has healed. Too quickly, too sharply, with a breath that trembles before she can suppress it. Luca isn't even looking at her at first. He never expects her to be the one who slips. Elena is always composed, always distant, always holding herself like a wall he's never been invited to climb. But the moment her Italian spills out, soft, breaking, terrified, Luca's attention snaps to her as if her voice has pulled something tight inside him. He doesn't understand the words, not fully, but he understands the tone. Regret threaded with panic. Something like pleading. Something she would never show him willingly. Elena keeps her back half-turned, shoulders stiff, breath shallow. There's a quiet, fractured sound in her throat as she tries to keep her voice steady. She fails. The caller says something that makes her inhale as if struck, and Luca feels the reaction under his own skin. When she hangs up, she freezes, not gracefully, just still, like a person bracing for the echo of something she wishes she could outrun. Then she sees him. Her eyes widen the smallest amount before she drags her gaze away like his attention is too heavy to bear. "Elena," Luca says, quiet but unyielding. "What was that?" She shakes her head instantly, stepping back as if his voice has cut too close. "It's not your concern." The lie bruises the air between them. He can feel it sitting in his chest, too cold, too deliberate. Luca takes a step toward her, not to corner her, but because he can't stay still. He needs to understand why her voice sounded like a breaking promise. Elena avoids him, keeping her distance like she's afraid proximity will loosen her hold on herself. "You don't get to decide that," Luca murmurs, though his voice is softer than he intends. "Not when you look like that." She flinches, barely, but enough. And something about that sliver of truth makes his chest tighten. She's always quiet, always still, always composed. But now her silence feels like she's swallowing screams. The tension between them only grows when they're forced to stay in the same space for the rest of the evening. Some unexpected crisis binds them together, ensuring she can't retreat to the shadows she thinks make her safe. Luca feels her resistance like a hand pressed against his chest. Every time she turns away, every time she cuts her breath short, every time she refuses to meet his eyes, something inside him drags tighter. Elena keeps her arms close to her body, as if holding herself together. Luca watches her struggle, the way her composure fractures in brief, painful flashes. There's a moment when she exhales, soft, trembling, before quickly masking it. And Luca feels it, all of it. The weight she carries, the fear she won't name, the past she's trying to bury beneath silence. "Elena," he says again. Hours later, when the tension becomes unbearable, "Talk to me." "You don't want to know," she whispers. He doesn't know what hits him harder, the words or the exhaustion in her voice. She sounds tired of running, tired of pretending she isn't breaking. "Why do you think that?" Luca asks more gently than anyone expects of him. Her eyes lift to his for just a heartbeat, and he sees something she never lets slip. Pain. Pure and unfiltered. Because knowing me never ends well for anyone, she murmurs. The confession unsettles him deeply. It feels like a secret she never meant to reveal, a moment of vulnerability she can't take back. And for the first time, Elena looks less like a woman hiding and more like someone carrying the remnants of a life she wishes she could erase. Luca wants to ask more. He wants to pull the truth out of her hands, wants to understand the fear she shapes herself around. But before he can speak, one of his people rushes in with news, quiet, urgent, unforgiving. They hand him a name he recognizes, a name he thought had been driven far out of his world. The caller. And when Luca's eyes lift to Elena, she knows he's found out. The silence between them cracks open. He's not angry. He's not shocked. He's something worse, hurt that she's been carrying this alone. Elena, he breathes. Why didn't you tell me? She steps back again, but this time there's no strength in it, only heartbreak. Because this is exactly what I wanted to avoid, she whispers. Your world and mine, colliding. It was never supposed to happen. Luca feels something inside him shift painfully, like understanding arriving too late. Elena wraps her arms around herself, her voice barely audible. He used to own everything about my life, and now he's here, close to you. I won't let you be dragged into this. Elena, I'm leaving. The words slice through him with more force than he expects. She says them like she's handing him a goodbye she already regrets. Luca takes a breath that feels like it costs him something. You think walking away protects me? He asks quietly. It protects you from me, she murmurs, and the sorrow in her voice feels like it should break something visible. He watches her move around the room, gathering her things with hands that shake too much. Every movement feels like a farewell she doesn't want to give. She pauses at the door, head bowed, whispering, "Thank you for everything I never deserved." Something in Luca snaps. Not with anger, never that. It's something raw, unguarded, terrifyingly human. The realization hits him fully, finally. Losing her feels wrong in a way that nothing else ever has. She's the first thing he's wanted that isn't tied to power. The first person whose fear he wants to carry, not turn away from. Elena. His voice breaks. He doesn't care. She freezes, her back to him. Luca steps forward, the words leaving him before he can stop them, before pride or logic can barricade them. Don't let her go. The command isn't loud. It's barely more than a breath, but it's the first order he's ever given out of fear, not control. His people move instantly, but Luca doesn't look at them. His eyes stay on Elena, who stands perfectly still as the meaning sinks into her bones. He finally speaks again, voice low, aching, stripped of every barrier he usually wears. Not her, Luca whispers. Anyone else, but not her. Elena turns slowly, her expression breaking open with a mixture of disbelief and something softer, something that looks dangerously close to hope. And in the silence that follows, everything between them changes. Luca heard Elena's voice before he understood the words, and the sound alone tightened something deep inside him. Elena never pleaded, never trembled, never let a single emotion slip past the walls. She guarded with a kind of fierce, stubborn discipline. But now her tone cracked on the edges of a language she rarely spoke aloud, as if Italian itself had become a wound. He didn't mean to listen. He only froze because it didn't sound like her, because it sounded like someone breaking quietly in a corner, trying not to be heard. When Elena turned and saw Luca standing there, her breath stumbled. She ended the call instantly, whispering a soft apology into the receiver before lowering the phone with hands that weren't steady. Elena. Luca's voice was low, controlled, but she reacted as if he'd shouted. A slight flinch, a retreating step, her eyes refusing his. It was nothing, she murmured, but the apology lingered between them like a bruise. I shouldn't have taken it. I'm sorry." The apology pierced deeper than the call itself. Elena never apologized to him. If anything, she challenged, deflected, guarded. This softness unsettled him more than the tremble he had heard. "Elena," he repeated, gentler this time, but she shook her head. "Please. Luca, don't ask." The plea wasn't sharp. It was frightened. The fear in it made Luca's chest twist with an instinct he didn't know how to name. He stepped toward her, but she moved back again, and the space between them turned into something aching. He didn't push. Not at first. He tried to convince himself that giving her space was the right thing. But the hours dragged, and they were forced to remain in the same room, orbiting each other with a tension that grew heavier each time she avoided looking at him. Elena kept to the edge of the space, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold her own ribs in place. When he said her name, she flinched. When she accidentally met his eyes, she looked away so quickly it hurt more than if she'd glared. It made Luca restless, made him pace without meaning to, made him replay the sound of her trembling voice until it carved itself into him. Finally, he couldn't stand it. "Elena, look at me." She froze, but she didn't lift her eyes. "Luca, please don't." "I'm not angry," he said, and he hated how rough it came out. "I'm just worried." Worried felt small, inadequate, nothing close to what tightened in him when she folded inward like that. When she didn't respond, he exhaled slowly, forcing patience through the storm inside him. "Talk to me. I won't judge. I just want to understand what that call was. You sounded—" He hesitated, because he didn't want to use a word that would push her further away. But Elena whispered it herself. "Weak." His heart clenched painfully at the word. "No?" Luca said quietly. "Not weak? Hurt?" That single word hit something inside her. Her shoulders trembled, almost imperceptibly. He stepped closer, slowly this time, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Elena." "Who called you?" Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Silence stretched between them, suffocating, heavy with everything she wouldn't allow herself to reveal. Then, unexpectedly, she whispered, "Someone who should not have the right to speak my name anymore." The confession was so fragile, so raw. Luca's breath stilled. He had never heard her voice like that, thin, cracking around the edges. "Elena, don't," she said quickly, backing away, but her voice wavered. "Luca, don't be kind. Not about this." "I'm not being kind," he murmured. "I'm being honest." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, as if trying to keep every memory from spilling out. But the more she tried to distance herself, the more Luca felt something inside him burning. Protectiveness, anger, fear, all tangled so tightly he couldn't separate one from the other. "Tell me who he is," Luca said, and his voice wasn't calm anymore. "Tell me what he wants from you." "I can't," she whispered. "If I explain, you'll—" Her voice broke. "You'll see me differently." "Elena, nothing could make me—" "Yes." Her eyes finally met his, and for the first time he saw everything she'd tried to hide. Yes, it could. The vulnerability in her gaze hit him like a blow. There was a moment, just a moment, where he felt her walls crack, where she looked at him as if he was the only place she wished she could rest. And then she dragged her gaze away, as if ashamed of letting him see even that much. He stepped closer. She didn't move back this time, but her breathing quickened, uneven. "Elena, what did he say to you?" The answer came like a barely audible confession, that he still expects me to come back. Luca felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest, and that he doesn't appreciate someone else interfering. Luca tensed. The pieces fell together too quickly, too painfully. This man wasn't simply someone from her past. He was someone who believed he still held ownership over her. "Elena," Luca said, voice tightening. "How long has he been contacting you?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "That's exactly why I can't stay," she whispered. He went still. "What?" She took a shaky breath. "Luca, staying here only puts you in danger. You don't understand the kind of person he is. I don't care about him." The words came out too fast, too fierce. "But he cares about you now," she said softly, "because of me." His heartbeat hammered painfully. He saw the decision forming in her eyes long before she spoke it. "Someone like me shouldn't drag someone like you into this," she whispered. "It would destroy you, and I can't—" Her voice cracked. "I can't let that happen." "Elena, I'm leaving." She said it with a kind of hollow finality that ripped something open inside him. She turned toward the door, and Luca felt panic flood him in a way he had never felt before, raw, unfamiliar, terrifying. "Elena, stop." She didn't. His chest pulled so tight he could barely force breath through it. "Elena, don't walk out." But she kept moving, her steps soft, her shoulders trembling, her silence unbearable. He didn't recognize the sound in his own voice when it finally broke free, rough, strained, pulled from a place he didn't know he had. "Don't let her go." It wasn't a command. It wasn't an order. It was fear. Fear he couldn't hide, couldn't bury, couldn't silence. And for the first time since he'd met her, Elena froze, not because she was afraid of the past calling her, but because Luca's voice finally revealed the truth he had never dared say out loud. He couldn't bear losing her,